Interest rate worries send asset classes like gold, the Aussie dollar and cryptocurrencies to extreme levels. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese welcomes the new British Prime Minister Keir Starmer and deceased stars like Judy, Garland and Sir Lawrence Olivier to be heard again, thanks to AI. Welcome to Fear and Greed, daily business news for people who make their own decisions. It is Monday, the 8th of July, 2024. I'm Michael Thompson and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael.
Sean, the main story this morning, as global investors worry about rising interest rates, the threat of a recession and uncertainty around the economic outlook, there are some out-of-the-ordinary moves among some popular asset classes.
Gold is a great example. It's fetching just under $2,400 an ounce. Now, apart from briefly in mid-2020 and then April and May last year, gold has never fetched more than $2,000 an ounce. Yet the precious metal has traded consistently above that level since November last year. It's a sign of just how fickle markets are at the moment. And as a store of value, gold's attractive. If investors were confident about the future, gold wouldn't be worth this much money. I'd almost guarantee you that one. Then there's the Aussie dollar. It enters the week trading at 67.5 US cents. It's now at its highest level since the beginning of the year. And the last time it consistently traded above this level was back in 2022. The story is that the Aussie dollar actually hasn't been consistently this weak against the US dollar for 2 decades. It's more actually about the US dollar appreciating. The greenback's been very strong against major currencies for a couple of years, and like gold, that's a reflection of the uncertainty and the desire of investors to hold the safest currency. Now, the appreciation of the Aussie dollar over the past week or so is actually a change in the trend, and it reflects growing signs that the US Federal Reserve will cut interest rates later this year while the Reserve Bank won't. But the Aussie dollar, for a number of months, has been much weaker than it has been for about 20 years.
Sean, one asset that hasn't done quite so well in recent sessions is Bitcoin. It's kind of dropped as part of a wider crypto sell-off.
The digital asset fell by 6% late last week to its lowest level since February. It's been traded around $58,000 a unit. Smaller tokens like Ether and XRP have also fallen, most by more than Bitcoin. There's a bunch of challenges for crypto buyers at the moment. The surge in demand for US Bitcoin exchange-traded funds has waned somewhat. There are reports that governments are actually disposing of tokens. Also, the US political situation isn't helping riskier assets. And the administrators of the failed Mt. Gox exchange are returning a hoard of Bitcoin to creditors in stages. You may not remember Mt. Gox, Michael. It's a Japanese-based group. It was the biggest exchange in the world about 10 years ago, doing about 70% of transactions. Then it just suddenly stopped operating, basically. Bitcoins went missing. Administrators now have $8 billion worth of Bitcoin to disperse. It isn't quite clear how much of that is going to be sold, but certainly it is putting pressure on it. So to wrap all this up, we have Bitcoin, which was doing really well, has come off the boil. The Aussie dollar, weaker than it has been for about 20 years. Gold, better than it's ever been. And it's all on the back of uncertainty about what's going to happen to interest rates.
I was going to ask you another question about Mt. Gox, because I find that whole thing, that's quite intriguing. But you know what? I'm going to leave it not to me to ask you these questions, but I'm going to put the call out to listeners that if there's anything that you want to ask Sean, it can be about Mt. Gox. It could be about something else that Sean is more likely to be able to answer. Because we have our bonus episode now, Sean. It comes up every twice a week, kind of Tuesdays, Thursdays, around there. And it is about Ask Fear and Greed. So if there's a question, a burning question that you have within you, well, if it's burning, probably see a doctor. But if you have a question that you really want to get out there, send it on through the website. Go to fearandgreed.com.au or head to LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram. Ask your question and we will do our very best to answer. It doesn't have to be about Mt. Gox. Sean, local markets, how do they perform on Friday?
The S&P ASX 200 closed down slightly, 0.1%, to 7,822 points. Healthcare stocks led the way, while the materials index was the weakest. Wasn't a great day for the big miners. BHP, Fortescue Metals Group and Rio Tinto were all lower. The banks were mixed, though National Australia Bank fell more than 1.5%. Telstra was among the best, rising 1% for the first full week of the year. The ASX 200 closed 0.7% higher. During that week, energy stocks were the best performers, helped along by the coal companies. The big miners did well, as did the property companies. The worst sub-index was utilities.
You've got a great interview coming up after the show with Grady Wolfe, market analyst at trading platform Bell Direct.
Yeah, look, Grady is a wonderful person, great communicator, and we said, so give us 5 stocks that you're looking at over the next 12 months. Now, 2 of those 5, I must admit I knew nothing about. The other 3 I knew very little about. So we run through the 5 stocks, why she likes them. We talk about the risks as well. Every time you're investing, you need to think not just the upside, but there's always downside or potential for downside as well. So we talked to Grady about that. It's kind of her 5 tips for the year.
Yeah, it's a terrific interview. It is coming up after the show. Stick around for that one. Now, thanks to Blue Chip Communication, the experts helping financial services companies market, communicate and grow. Visit bluechipcommunication.com.au. What's happening in international markets?
Earnings season on Wall Street kicks in this week and expectations are high. In fact, they're probably higher than they've been for a few years. That's evident in the broad-based S&P 500 and the tech-heavy Nasdaq trading around record levels, up 17% and 23% respectively this year. The consensus forecast is for a 9% jump in earnings for the June quarter. That's a lot. That'll be the biggest quarter since the first quarter back in 2022. Investment banks, including JP Morgan, Chase and Citigroup, kick off the season properly on Friday. The tech stocks are up in a couple of weeks' time.
All right, a bit to get through. We'll be back in a moment with the rest of the day's business news. Sean, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese rang new British PM Sir Keir Starmer over the weekend, congratulated him and discussed the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Samoa later this year.
According to a Downing Street spokesperson, Sir Keir also said he hoped to build on the already strong AUKUS partnership between Australia, the UK and the US, and the 2 leaders agreed to stay in close touch. Our Prime Minister, using X, said the 2 had a lot of work to do together to grow economies, advance AUKUS and seize the opportunities of the global clean energy transformation. Mr Albanese was just one of many global leaders getting in touch with the new British Prime Minister after his landslide victory last week that ended 14 years of Conservative rule. Interestingly, he also announced his cabinet, but probably of note, Britain's first female treasurer was announced. Her name is Rachel Reeves.
Sean, payments for sex work will be banned under changes to the NDIS scheme, with Minister Bill Shorten conceding a wide range of services being billed to taxpayers are unsustainable.
Mr Shorten criticised the opposition and the Greens for dragging out passage of legislation to overhaul exploding costs, saying another round of parliamentary hearings will hit the budget by about $1.1 billion, the equivalent of paid packages for as many as 60,000 children. But the coalition said it won't be bullied into supporting changes proposed by the federal government, insisting a further Senate inquiry is necessary, according to a report in the Financial Review. Mr Shorten admitted courts and the Administrative Appeals Tribunal had frustrated government efforts to stop unreasonable and inappropriate spending. Asked if payments for sex work would be banned, Mr Shorten told Sky News such a move was necessary even if cases were isolated. The $42 billion program is already on track to overtake the age pension within 3 years as the most expensive area of government spending.
All right, taking a look at property now. Sean, it was a pretty good weekend for auction results, with the preliminary clearance rate coming in at 74.7%. That's the highest level since early April.
It was a really good weekend. In Sydney, the clearance rate was 76.7%, up almost 5 percentage points from the previous week. Best result in a couple of months. In Melbourne, the preliminary clearance rate was 70.2%, up a couple of percentage points. Adelaide came in at 84.8%. Brisbane was 78.9%, which is a very good result for that market. Canberra was the only major city to record a drop in the clearance rate, down to 64.3%. The number of auctions was lower than the week before. It was about 1,700 or so, though it was still much higher than a year ago. We are going into that winter lull, but we're going into that winter lull, well, I'd say with a little bit of momentum, Michael. Can you go into a lull with momentum? Not sure.
Yeah, you can. It makes it for quite an uncomfortable lull. But interesting, isn't it, that here we are kind of with talk about the potential for higher interest rates, and you would expect these clearance rates to be a lot lower than they are.
Yeah. I mean, that demands, well, the lack of housing, so it's the supply side and then the demand with net migration so high, it really is keeping a floor under prices and also just ensuring that places that are going to market are selling.
Yeah. Now, BHP bosses have docked employee incentives around the globe based on failures to hit internal performance targets on costs, production, safety and gender equity.
The mining giant late last week notified tens of thousands of workers that it will only pay out 80% of short-term incentives that were on offer for the last financial year, according to a report in the Financial Review. Workers at BHP's Queensland Coal Division were singled out. They'll receive only 70% of the incentives after 2 downgrades in sales guidance and a fatality at the Saraji mine in the Bowen Basin. The incentive calls were made by BHP executive leadership team. Now, that includes Chief Executive Mike Henry. He'll be across the fact that these cuts were made. The short-term incentives apply to all workers at BHP. They can add up to about 15% of salary. So there'll be a lot of workers not real happy this morning.
That's a lot of workers with incentives built into their salaries, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And one of the key issues, because there was a death at BHP, and so it's very hard to give people, the full incentive when a tragedy like that occurs. Though what you do find is that different parts of the workforce are saying, well, hold on, we shouldn't, we should be rewarded or otherwise for what happened in our part of the business. So it's a tricky one for BHP.
Oh, it certainly is. Now, this is an interesting one. The federal government is proposing to more than quadruple the protected oceans around Australia's Heard and McDonald Islands.
The islands are 4,000 kilometres southwest of Western Australia and 1,700 kilometres north of Antarctica, and the remote sub-Antarctic islands are considered a pristine wilderness. Some of the photos of them, Michael, are quite magnificent. The proposal recommends expanding this marine reserve by more than 3,000 square kilometres. Minister for the Environment and Water, Tanya Plebiscik, said the quadrupling of the size of the marine parks around both islands would help preserve it for future generations. She said the proposal means protecting additional oceans the size of Italy and bringing half of Australian oceans under protection. A massive area, but it's, if you get the chance, Heard, Heard, and McDonald Islands, worth looking up.
All right, I will do. Turning to international news now, Joe Biden is ignoring a growing clamour, Sean, to drop out of the 2024 presidential race, saying one bad debate shouldn't ruin 3.5 years' work.
He did a primetime interview over the weekend and held campaign events in Pennsylvania and said no one is more qualified to be president or win the race than him. But that hasn't stopped senior Democrats from calling for him to abandon his bid for re-election. A number of elected Democrats are now openly saying he should step down. Over the weekend, the Democratic governor of Massachusetts became the first state governor to publicly say Biden should step down. Mr. Biden's Vice President, Kamala Harris, Californian Governor Gavin Newsom, and Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer are all seen as possible candidates should the president step aside. But all have so far remained publicly very loyal to his campaign. Mind you, it isn't all bad news. We're hearing all this news about Joe Biden, but I noticed over the weekend there was a Bloomberg tracking poll of voting intentions in battleground states, places around the Midwest. Donald Trump's lead has actually narrowed to 47 versus 45%. That's actually the smallest gap since October last year. So while the debate was a debacle, we also had the Supreme Court ruling last week, which will tip people one way or another. But it's not like people are deserting the president at this point.
And that may, in fact, kind of discourage anyone from challenging him publicly.
Absolutely. In fact, I don't think anyone will challenge him publicly, certainly none of those three. They'll all wait for him to step down. Now, if he doesn't step down, obviously they won't challenge, but I don't think anyone will challenge him unless he decides he needs to leave.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? Now, Samsung Electronics expects its profits for the 3 months to the end of June to be 15 times higher than last year on the back of the artificial intelligence boom.
Phenomenal. And Samsung's not this little company.
No.
It is huge. The AI boom has pushed up the prices of advanced chips, driving up the firm's forecast for this June quarter. The South Korean group is the world's largest maker of memory chips, smartphones and televisions. It's now forecasting operating profits for the 3 months of about 11 billion Aussie dollars, that is. $11 billion, not bad. Samsung Electronics is a flagship unit of South Korean conglomerate Samsung Group. Most of us know it for its smartphones. And while the flagship S24 phone with AI features is selling well, the high material marketing costs are actually hitting profits in that division. However, the chip business is clearly booming.
I mentioned this one at the top of the show, Sean. Judy Garland and Sir Laurence Olivier are to narrate audiobooks, even though they're dead, under a new deal to clone their voices using artificial intelligence. I don't know about this.
A group called the Vent Labs, a London-founded business launched by a couple of Polish entrepreneurs, said it had reached deals with the estates of Ms. Garland and Sir Lawrence to use their audio likenesses in a new app, according to a report in the Telegraph of London. The late actors will lend their voices to 11 Labs Reader app, where users will be able to pick celebrities to read their favourite novels, a product it has dubbed Iconic Voices. Now, Ms. Garland's daughter, Liza Minnelli, said it's exciting to see her mother's voice available to the countless millions of people who love her. People will also be able to listen to digital versions of books by James Dean, or effectively AI read by James Dean, Rebel Without a Cause actor. He died in 1955, but don't let that stop you. Burt Reynolds as well, Michael.
I just don't know about this one, Sean.
A bit the same.
It makes me feel a little bit uncomfortable. How about this, though? This is quite incredible. 39-year-old basketball superstar LeBron James has agreed to a 2-year, $104 million deal with the LA Lakers, the highest ever for a person of his age, pushing his wealth to $1.5 billion according to the Bloomberg Billionaires Index.
That's just to play basketball well. Pretty phenomenal. It also, that contract is significant because it confirms James's long-held goal of playing with his son, Bronny James Jr. He's a 19-year-old who was drafted by the Lakers last week. Reportedly, he agreed to a 4-year, $7.9 million contract. What's that, about $2 million a year compared to his father's $52 million a year? Anyway, the senior James, who's entering his 22nd season in the NBA, holds the league's all-time scoring record and averaged 25.7 points per game last year, putting him in the top 15 players in the league. Quite phenomenal for a 38/39-year-old. According to Bloomberg, he is the wealthiest of the current crop of players. He ain't no Michael Jordan, though, and I'm not just talking about on the court. Michael Jordan's wealth is estimated at more than $4 billion. Now, he sold a stake in Charlotte Hornets last year. That's how they valued him, $4 billion. Not bad.
That is just staggering wealth.
Staggering, yeah.
Up next is Fear and Greed, the week ahead, featuring our resident economist, Stephen Koukoulas.
All about, well, it's actually not a very busy week, to be honest, this week. Not a lot of some finance data out.
Way to sell it there, Sean.
Yeah, I know. I was going to go heavy on that. Then I thought, well, actually, Steve, we talk a lot about what's going on in markets and where the economy's up to, which is sometimes it's good to have a quiet week just so you can sort of check out the bigger picture, which is exactly what we do with Stephen.
Yeah, I don't think a lack of kind of upcoming data has ever stopped the two of you.
No, he's an enthusiast, no doubt about it.
Yeah, that's coming up next in the Fear and Greed playlist. And after that is your daily interview, speaking today with Grady Wolfe, market analyst from trading platform Bell Direct.
Grady's 5 top picks for the next 12 months. They're all small caps, a couple that I didn't know anything about.
Yeah, it is well worth a listen. They are both up in the Fear and Greed playlist on your podcast platform or at fearandgreed.com.au, which is also where you can sign up for the Fear and Greed weekly newsletter coming out on Wednesday. So get in ahead of that, nice and early. Do that today so you don't even have to think about it. And then Wednesday morning, the newsletter will just arrive in your inbox like a special treat. Thank you very much, Sean.
Thanks, Michael.
It's Monday, the 8th of July, 2024. Make sure you're following the podcast and please join us online on LinkedIn, Instagram, X, TikTok and Facebook. I'm Michael Thompson and that was Fear and Greed. Have a great day.